the current Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said in 2019 that the older generation has let the world down. I'm not so sure about that, because I would like to present to you evidence of one of the persons from the older generation who made a global impact. I need to take you to 1969, when there was an explosion of interest about environmental issues, which led the then Secretary General U Thant from Burma to call for an Earth Summit, and this resolution was passed in the UN. And the task of organizing this in 1972, fell on the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Philip Disen. But as with some situations within the UN, things don't go according to plan. And there were problems concerning the organization. And the Swedish government, of course, agreed to host it, but there was a possibility that it might not have been held. At that time, Wayne was working in Geneva at the Department for Economic and Social Information. And during one of his quiet times, he thought about recommending Maurice Strong to head the Secretariat. And this proposal from Wayne was taken up at the top level, and Maurice Strong was appointed as the Secretary General of the United Nations Conference. And his son, Ken Strong, is here. Stand up, please, Ken. And Strong turned the process around. In 1972, we had 5th of June, the beginning of the UN Conference on the Human Environment, and it was a historic occasion. At the conference, Wayne was the one who coordinated and organized the representation from the civil society, and I'm now speaking directly at young people in the audience. He led the way in enabling, and this was something somewhat unusual during the days gone by, to bring the civil society in to deliberations involving governments. But he did it, and it was a success. Now I'm going to read to you a short set of sentences from Maurice Strong's book, actually, to give you evidence that Wayne was the one who had this thought. In his book called Where on Earth Are We Going?, Maurice Strong says, a young Canadian friend, for Maurice, Wayne was always young, who was a media consultant to the UN at the time, arranged a meeting with Disen. I've heard this story told to me on several occasions Morris says, did I tell you about how Wayne got me into this environmental business? And then with Wayne, did I tell you about how Maurice Strong came into the UN system and saved us at Stockholm? So I've heard this 10 to 20 times. And I always say no when they ask me the questions, because I like to get it repeated again and again. Immediately after the historic UN conference in '72, which led to the establishment of the United Nations Environment Programme, the UN agency, the environmental conscience of the UN system, Wayne produced what he calls tabloids. And here is the first public document of the Earth Summit. This is in English, and this is in French. And and these are the only copies available of that production. This kind of thing was not heard of in the UN. Normally, UN information bureaucrats are those who are government officials who get sent to being UN information officers, led out to pasture. But this was something unique, and this went around the world. Stockholm had a global impact. So that's interesting to ponder, because out of the thought and concern of one individual, you changed global policy. After this, of course, UNEP was established, and I was recruited to work with the Division of Communication under Wayne. And he put together a rather bizarre motley group of people. We were all media professionals, rather different from the UN information organization. They were called the Office of Public Information. Wayne used to call them the Office of Public Misinformation. But we did things there which were pioneering. And we produced professional material, brought together some 450 media outlets, blue chip newspapers, and media organizations, and disseminated information to them. And this was something which was not done in the United Nations system. The other thing which Wayne was very keen on was not to only put out material in the normal languages, the usual languages, English, French, and Spanish. He wanted, and he emphasized and encouraged us to make sure that the language was disseminated in Urdu, in Bahasa, in Punjabi, in Kiswahili, in Tagalog, and so on. And as a result, the environment movement through UNEP had an unprecedented global impact. And this was very important in laying down the foundations and stabilizing the work of the United Nations Environment Programme, because there were many, including UN agencies, including governments who overtly supported the environmental cause, but they were planning to try and limit the impact of the organization. And there were even some faith organizations were very hesitant about UNEP. Why? Because they thought that the ecological process would challenge this concept of man's dominion on earth. So Wayne and Morris together laid down the foundations to stabilize and to create a sustainable world. And if you despair at what's going on, what I would like you to think through is how one single individual can make a difference in the world. The world, humankind, owes mankind a debt. There is no doubt, as far as I'm concerned, about that. This is something which I would like to really hit home, and have come all the way from England to be here to point out the impact that this Canadian has had on the world. Humankind has and owes a great debt to Wayne Loxley Kynes. And finally, I'd like to just say, in my tradition as a Buddhist chaplain now, as I am working in several universities in the UK, I would like to say goodbye by saying, Vaya Dhamma Sankara Appamadena Sampadetati. All conditions are subject to change. Strive diligently and sustainably. Thank you so much.